first guest tonight is the Emmy-winning host of All In with Chris Hayes, which airs weeknights on MS Now. He also hosts the podcast Why Is This Happening? His #1 New York Times bestselling book, The Siren's Call, How Attention Became the World's Most Endangered Resource, is out now in paperback. Please welcome back to the show our friend Chris Hayes, everybody.
It's great to be back in 30 Rock.
It's nice to have you at 30 Rock. How was the day with the kids? Because it was not a snow day.
No, we got to get to do a little Zoom schooling.
Yep.
Which is fun.
Nice old throwback.
And a little, nice little PTSD for the kiddos.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine harder for the teachers than the kids.
Yes. You know, the biggest problem is just like, it was just instantly re-traumatizing because I remember doing this exactly 5-6 years ago. You're just constantly wrestling with like logins and two-factor authentication and why did I get locked out? And at some level it's good because an 11-year-old should understand this is a lot of your life going forward.
Yeah. True, totally. The lesson is this. I can't, the amount that there is like, and again, I understand like schools have to put security first, right? The amount, it's so hard to log into things at my kid's school and I'm like, nobody wants to be here. Like, why are you making it so hard to be here? Nobody wants to get in here.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I get it from like their perspective, but yes, but we got through it. And then we also, we got some sledding in.
Oh, nicely done.
Some playing in the park.
All right,
so
great.
That was pretty special.
All right, so well done. Now, there is sometimes, you know, with the news the way it is, obviously it's very depressing to cover. And sometimes it's actually like nice to talk about things like storms. You had to, back in the day, do a little bit of snowfall coverage as a reporter?
Well, I was actually telling my kids this story because I think it was in 2014 or 2015. I just started the show. And if you'll recall back then, the interest in political news was low.
Yeah.
It was, people were like kind of checked out. It was not like it's been
there would
recently
be full days where we just wouldn't do a show, nobody noticed.
Unfortunately, same for me. And so there was a big storm that was going to hit the East Coast. And, you know, producers like to produce.
Yeah.
Phil Griffin, the former president of MSNBC, he was a producer first, came up with this idea that I was going to drive around in the snowstorm for the full hour of my show.
Gotcha.
In an SUV.
Right.
Which I was like, I don't really want to do that, but okay. And then we got it, we rigged up the car, we did it, and like no snow came.
Yeah.
So then it was an hour of me just driving around in an SUV.
So it's just like carpool karaoke with no song.
With no song.
Yeah.
And also like not a particularly like charismatic entertainer.
Yeah.
So.
Not to shift to something that is far more depressing, but I do want to get your take on the tragic events in Minneapolis this weekend. I
mean, I don't have any insights or novel observations other than it's horrific. And I think that there is a profound moral revulsion that has begun to kind of ripple through society outward and outward in these sort of circles that emanate from what we've seen in Minneapolis, both with Renee Good and with Mr. Preddy's death. And I think that we're in a situation right now where people who've not been checked in are waking up to the kind of abject moral depravity that is what this administration is at this moment. And I also think that like the courage and testimony and witness and organization of the people of Minneapolis is astoundingly inspiring.
Yeah. You know, it's also, you know, I can't speak to how lucky we are that they're all, and obviously we've seen what an incredible risk it is even to hold up a camera to ICE officials, right? With Alex Preddy. But without these cameras, like the narrative would be totally run by this administration that we know will actually get out ahead of the video and tell a story that is patently, provably false.
I mean, it's almost, I think the only adjective to describe the way that they have approached this is sociopathic. For Stephen Miller to say this man was a would-be assassin who wanted to massacre federal officials.
Yeah.
And to tell all of us that that's obviously not true. And it's not obviously not true because you're a liberal, or it's obviously not true because you don't like Donald Trump. It's just obviously not true. Anyone with eyes to see. And I think, part of what I've been thinking about and this is such a horrible tragedy. I mean, there's been 3 homicides, 3 basically shooting deaths in Minneapolis all year. One of them was a crime, traditional, and 2 of them are by ICE agents.
Yeah.
Okay? Part of what I think is getting to people here is that they think they can control reality. And in the end, it's almost this sort of elemental battle that you see time and time again with sort of would-be authoritarian regimes about whether reality can emerge triumphant over this kind of regime of lies. And it took tremendous courage for the people that have recorded. I mean, that's what, Alex Preddy was doing when he was murdered.
Yep.
And I say that advisedly. And it's what the woman in the pink coat was doing. It's what Renee Good's wife did. And it's taken incredible courage for people to do this, but it's so vital that we have that documentation.
It seems as though, certainly today, there's a bit of Trump maybe doing his classic thing of backing off a little bit. There's talk that maybe Bovino is going to leave Minneapolis, Tom Homan's going to come in, that they might actually sense the way the wind is blowing on this, which is it is deeply unpopular, and they are not, at least at this point, capable of bending this reality in the way that maybe they have with other issues in the past. Do you feel like they're stepping back from the precipice of this a little?
Here's what I feel. They are unambiguously losing.
Right.
They are losing. And part of the tradition of nonviolent civil resistance and disobedience, from Gandhi through King, through what we've seen on the streets of Minneapolis, is that in a fearless and disciplined fashion, refusing to give an inch to the regime, you expose its malevolence. And that's what happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge when the cops started beating up the protesters. It's what we've seen in Minneapolis. And the hope for that kind of disciplined resistance is that it wakes people up to the moral truth that's at the core of the relationship between the forces of oppression and the people being oppressed. And we are seeing one of those moments right now. It has cost 2 people their lives, and other people not going to school, and other people being tear gassed, and other people being thrown into detention. But this has been a tremendous political and moral victory, even if nothing happens up until this point, at the horrible, tragic cost of these 2 lives. And they are absolutely getting their butts kicked. They're not going to just throw in the towel and admit it, but I think they are now looking for the exits in a real way.
We have seen, again, you talk about how inspirational these people in the streets of Minneapolis have been. How do you feel, or do you feel, that congressional Democrats are rising to this moment in a way that is inspirational in any way, shape, or form?
I think the people are leading and they're following.
Yeah. Which might be okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, in some ways, I think a lot of times that's exactly what happens, right? I mean, you can look at the Gallup polling on MLK. You could look at I saw Gallup polling today on the Kent State shooting, in which 65% of people, or 70% thought it was justified after it happened. What's happened is the Democrats' political class and consultant class got pounded into their head they were on the wrong side of the immigration issue, which wasn't crazy because they genuinely were on the wrong side of public opinion in 2022, 23, and 24. It genuinely hurt them politically, particularly what was happening at the border vis-a-vis asylum. They then internalized the lesson as just don't talk about immigration. If we're talking about immigration, we're losing. And then they tried to pull off this thing where we're just not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it. Well, it turns out you're going to have to talk about it.
Yeah.
And basically what's happened is that the courage and moral fortitude and organization and persistence of people from Los Angeles to Chicago to Memphis to now Minneapolis has forced public opinion in the right direction that now the Democratic elected politicians can kind of file in behind them.
It is a real interesting moment in American history. We're very lucky to have you here to talk about it, but I also want to talk about your book. We will be back with Chris Hayes right after this. Welcome back. We're here with Chris Hayes. We talked about your book when it came out in hardcover. Now it's in paperback. And this is a book you wrote about how our attention has become a commodity. And it was sort of based on the fact that you are in an attention business, cable news, but also a parent.
Yes.
And that's also very attention heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things you really get as a parent early on is how much about parenting is about attention, both your own attention on your child and about cultivating your child's attention, about, in many cases, dealing with boredom, both sometimes your own boredom, sometimes being with your kids is boring.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Did I just say that on national television?
Did this happen to you? Like, my dream was one day my kids would care about sports as much as I do, and now they do, and they're so boring. Like, we'll be walking to school, and they're like, who's better, Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani? I'm like, we can't talk about this anymore.
I've become quite the sports dad, and I got to say, I truly do love it to a disconcerting degree. But part of it, too, is a lot of childhood is dealing with your own boredom and how to regulate it. And in some ways, we associate boredom with childhood precisely because as soon as we get old enough, we don't allow ourselves to be bored at all.
Yeah.
That's why we have this little device in our pocket that's just a boredom killer all the time. And, every parent has had this experience, of like you're on your phone and your kid comes up to you and they're like, I'm bored. And you're like, go figure out. Don't be bored.
Yeah.
Go back to your... And so I think that the combination of my work, the combination of having to frankly cover Donald Trump and parenting all sort of came together.
Yeah. You also talk about, we are with AI, which, again, just from when you wrote the book to now, the amount of advancements that have happened. They were sort of in the steroid era, like steroids to MLB is what we were at with like AI in our society.
Yeah, I think there's a weird analogy here, which is that what happened in baseball was first the batters started juicing.
Yeah.
And then they were just like rocking the ball out of the park. And then the pitchers started juicing.
Yeah.
So then you'd have like a juiced up batter against a juiced up pitcher. And you're like, well, both of you guys could both get off the steroids.
Yeah.
And we could get back to the old equilibrium.
Yeah.
And no one has to do any injections,
Yeah.
right? So you've got this funny thing happening with AI where, like, for instance, it's never been easier to write a cover letter and to put together a resume.
Yeah.
ChatGPT can do it for you, right? So what's happening is, the applications places are getting for jobs have gone up. The applications for academic publications. So then what's the response? Well, you employ AI to screen them out. So it's like you got AI-generated slop and AI filters. And so all this is like, all the AI stuff is happening. It's like, where exactly do humans fit in? And do we need both of them? Can we get rid of both of them?
Yeah.
And go back to human-generated stuff and humans reading it?
Oh my God. But I was gonna say, like, obviously you're biased because you're a human.
That is absolutely true. No, but actually there is something about this that is true. I thought about this because sometimes people will say, you'll see someone say, they had to give a best man toast, right?
Yeah.
And they used an AI chatbot to do it. And I'm like, why would you do that? But then I think to myself, look, I'm a professional communicator and writer, right?
Yeah.
This is what I do for a living. Like, I have hired people to do things around my house that someone who knows how to do that might look and kind of scoff.
Right.
And say, like, why would you hire someone to do that rewiring? Just figure out how to do it yourself. So I am a little sensitive to, like, there are certain skills that I have that I think are important that everyone should have or are precious. And it is true, I think you can be a little biased because when, like, the machines come for the thing you do.
Oh, right.
You're a little like, well, why don't we don't need to make, let's.
Whoa,
I don't think we need AI
writing.
TV hosts, okay? They could do some other stuff, but not that.
We also do know, look, Donald Trump dominated people's attention.
Yes.
It's one of the things he did better, continues to do better than maybe any politician ever. And it has served him very well. Our mayor, Mamdani, did seem to understand that. Maybe the first sort of post-Trump politician to become national in a position that is not a national position. Do you fear that we are now going to see a lot of less charismatic politicians try to pull off the Mamdani/Trump playbook?
Oh, we're going to get so much vertical video.
Yeah.
You're going to be, you're already seeing like every Democratic candidate trying to sort of take the formal elements, but I actually don't think it's the worst thing. I mean, look, this is the way politics works.
Yeah.
It's the way sports works, right? Some team figures out some new offense and everyone kind of copycats it.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of like really cringeworthy knockoff Donald Trump impressions by Republicans.
Yep.
Ron DeSantis coming to mind most foremost. And I think you'll get a lot of that with Mamdani. But one of the things I think that's been really interesting about watching Mamdani make that transition from campaigning to governing is his continued understanding of how important that attention is. I mean, he put out this this video about snow plowing, right? And it wasn't a campaign video. It was totally non-ideological. It wasn't even political. It was just like, here's how we're going to, plow the snow in the streets, and here's what you should expect. But it was really good, and it was compelling. And
it was fun to show my kids.
It was fun to show your kids.
Yeah.
And I think that he gets, in a way that I think a lot of politicians don't, and particularly Democratic politicians, have this sense of like, well, the time for campaigning is over.
Right.
And now it's the time for governing. And now we're in a different mode, and we're a different register, and we're in a different form of communication. And I think he gets is that, like, no, you still got to just be talking to people all the time.
Yeah, never stop communicating.
Never
it's
stop.
It's a very good instinct. Thanks for being here. It's always such a
It's so
pleasure
good to
see
be
you.
here.
Chris Hayes, everybody, The Siren's Call is out now in paperback. We'll be right back with Bob of the Drag Queen.